All right. Well, it's almost 7:30, so we get go ahead and start getting settled in. Welcome, everyone. I will first do some quick introductions, and then I will also leave the floor to first, I would actually leave the floor to our WVLDI representative, I believe, who should be giving an introduction, but sure. And if not, I can go ahead and go right in and just get us started. So, well, good afternoon, good evening, or maybe even good morning, everyone, depending on where you're calling from. I have to say that we've had interest for this event from all over the United States, as well as over 16 countries. So I would not be surprised if someone had a good morning right now. So welcome. My name is Dr. Steffi Ann Dulapri, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am the current Community Outreach Chair at the Multicultural Veterinary Medical Association. I first want to acknowledge that I'm speaking with you all from the traditional lands of the Susquehanna people. The land takes up pretty much all of eastern and central Pennsylvania and expands much into New York, Maryland. And for those who do not know, MCVMA is a rapidly growing organization, which started around 2014, in 2014 as a Facebook group. And our mission is to promote diversity and cultural competency within the profession so as to better serve a diverse multicultural society. Today, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization and have grown into a board of 15 individuals, each spearheading various initiatives such as research, community outreach, such as myself, mentorship, education, and more. Each committee is actually supported by very excited volunteers who help support the organization, and you can find us on the web at mcvma.org, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So we also would like to give a very, very big thank you to our sponsors, Boehringer Ingelheim, BCA Nationwide, and Hills for helping us carry forward a lot of these events and initiatives. And we're also very excited to be presenting this wonderful panel to everyone with the help of our partners and collaborators, the WVLDI, Women Veterinary Leadership and Development Initiative. So welcome. And I'm going to leave the floor here to Kim right now, and she's going to give our WVLDI introduction, and then we'll move right along.
Thank you, Steffi. I'm Kim. I am the current president for the Women Veterinary Leadership Development Initiative, and I am super thankful for this panel. I think it's going to be an extremely informative and very impactful evening, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. A little bit about WVLDI. Our purpose is really to strengthen and elevate our professions. So from a vision standpoint, we inspire and we want to empower veterinary leaders to harness diversity and equity through just creating an inclusive professional community where all of our members can deliver on the promise of our veterinary oath. And our mission really is just to be strong and an impactful voice. And we do that through supporting women and allies seeking leadership positions, providing professional development and educational content like this evening, and developing student leaders and engaging in social media discussion. So super excited. I do want to say thank you to our sponsors. We have for WVLDI, we've got AVMA, who is a foundational partner for us. We have BI, Banfield, VPP, Bank of America, and this evening's event, we have a special sponsorship for this evening with RC and the Women Veterinary Leadership Forum. So thank you to all of our sponsors, and I will turn it back to Steffi or maybe to Tangela.
Yeah, I'll take it really quickly just to make sure. I'll introduce Angela, and thank you everyone again for coming, for giving your time, your energy, to this event. Just like Kim said, this is where we know that this is bound to be very impactful, with your stories and your experiences, and we're very privileged to be here to listen and to at least get a little bit get a look or understanding of what your experiences have been. So thank you again. So for now, let me introduce you to our wonderful moderator, Dr. Tangela Williams-Hill. And first, I would like to say Dr. Williams-Hill is currently an IDEXX professional service veterinarian for the Philadelphia region. She serves on both the MCVMA and WVLDI boards. On MCVMA, she is the current volunteer and special projects chair, and she again serves on the WVLDI board as well. And without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor here to Dr. Williams-Hill to take on.
Yes, thank you, Steffi. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's panel discussion. As mentioned, my name is Tangela Williams-Hill. I'll be your moderator for tonight, and I am truly excited to be able to sit down and discuss our topics tonight with 4 extraordinary women. There may be some of you out there in the audience that may not be familiar with some on our panelists. So what I'd like for each panelist to do is if you could take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and just kind of briefly talk about your journey. And I'll have I'm just going by who's showing up on my screen. So Dr. Tan, I'll go with you first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I go by she, her, hers, and I'm located in Calgary, which is the traditional territories of Treaty 7 in Southern Alberta and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So it's really nice to meet you all. I'm an equine internist. I'm a senior instructor at the University of Calgary in equine clinical sciences. You will see as we go through the panel that we have a very strong Cornell and University of Pennsylvania connection. So I'll kick that off by disclosing that I'm a Cornell grad. 2005, I did a private practice internship at Mid-Atlantic Equine Medical Center in New Jersey. I did my large animal residency at the University of Minnesota, and I did a fellowship at UC Davis. I was in private practice for some time in New Jersey, and then bought my own practice. So I was managing partner of my own practice near Syracuse, New York for almost 5 years, and then came to University of Calgary in 2015. So I've been here now for over 5 years. I've had a great time here. I have managed to kick off some initiatives here. I'm currently hold the hat of being the co-chair of the clinical skills program. I'm the business stream lead for the professional skills program. I've created a rotation that partners with the Indigenous nations around here. And as far as the DEI hat I wear, I'm currently the chair of the American Association of Equine Practitioners DEI Task Force. I'm on the Joint Commission of the AVMA, AAVMC Commission for a Diverse, Equitable, and Inclusive Profession, and I'm on the ACVIM Diversity Task Force. So I wear a few hats. So yeah, I guess that's about it.
All right, thank you and welcome. Margarita, you're next on my view screen here.
Hello, and thank you. I sort of want to say the same thing as Dr. Tan. Thank you so much for inviting me and all of us to this panel. I'm actually honored, and after reading everyone's bio and then listening to them, I'm sort of like, wow, they asked me to talk here. So I'm currently an associate veterinarian at the Nashville Zoo, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. So going a little bit along with the Cornell Penn connection, I did my undergrad at University of Pennsylvania. I actually got my master's at the same time for conservation biology. Zoo medicine and just wildlife was always a passion of mine, so I just decided, okay, might as well get it done. And then I went to vet school at Cornell University, so I'm a 2003 grad. Afterwards, I did a small animal internship. At that time, it was known as Raleigh Memorial, but it's the Angel Memorial Animal West Hospital. They kept changing names. And then, despite the fact that I love zoo medicine so much, I ended up deciding to stick to emergency medicine because I also liked it, and I always wanted to live in Seattle, so I went 3 years in Seattle, and then I did a 3-year residency between Oklahoma City Zoo and the Smithsonian's National Zoo for my Zoo Med residency, and I stayed there for an extra year. And then since then, I've been, I think it's almost been 10 years, the associate veterinarian at the Nashville Zoo, where I'm one of the primary clinicians doing all the preventative work. The zoo, it's a medium-sized zoo, but it's been growing, so it's been challenging. And then one of the things that the zoo, and it's also been my passion, has been a lot being involved in conservation biology programs. So as part of one of the things that the zoos participate are in what we call the SSPs, or the special species programs, where we sort of look at trying to maintain the genetic diversity within the captive populations of endangered and threatened animals. So I'm the veterinary advisor for giant anteaters for the southern Tamandua, as well as any other animals that fall within what we call the pack. So it's like the pangolin, aardvarks, and sinarthrans, so sort of mix in there. One of the other animals that I love are the cheetahs, so I've also become the scientific advisor for the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia, and one of the big programs I've been involved with is working with them in Somaliland in order to help sort of stave off some of the illegal wildlife trafficking that goes in there. So it's been helping them a lot and trying to help save some of the few cheetahs that are still exist in the wild for that. So that's sort of the quick synopsis. Trying to save.
Thank you, Dr. Woc-Colburn. I called you Margarita because I felt like you and our sisters after that phone call.
And my last name is such a mouthful too.
Yeah.
We usually maintain like doctor, like the first name versus the last name.
Right. All right, Dr. Fowler.
Sure. So I am, hi everyone, Dr. Heather Fowler. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey, currently now reside in Mount Holly, New Jersey, which is all of 20 minutes away, but I swear I did leave the state. I started off undergrad, Penn State. I thought I was on the fast track to be a small animal veterinarian, like many folks on this call probably. You know, when you think about being a veterinarian when you're young, you may not know how diverse the profession is and all the different roles that you can fulfill. So went to Penn State for undergrad, pre-vet major. Immediately after, went to Penn for vet school. And I have a unique background in terms of I actually work in food animal medicine, or the food animal space, but I mostly do public health work. So I don't have a lot of clinical practice, honestly. And you'll see that as I go through my kind of background. So after graduating from the University of Pennsylvania, I went straight to Yale and got a 1-year advanced professional master's of public health. From there, went to the Minnesota Department of Health and worked for 2 years as part of a CDC CSTE applied epidemiology program. It was really on-the-job training in public health. I'm the person you come to if you have questions about rabies. It's kind of sort of my wheelhouse. So really focused on zoonotic diseases. During that time in Minnesota, really started to enjoy education and outreach, which is a huge part of public health. So I went on to pursue a PhD in worker safety and health with an emphasis on veterinary medical and animal care workers. So my job is to protect everyone on the call, everyone listening today, make sure we're working in a way that prioritizes our safety regardless of what animals we're working with, or if we're in our desk all day, you know, that we're minding, protecting ourselves from ergonomic hazards. But immediately after completing that PhD, I realized the whole publisher perish life in academia wasn't for me, but I still love that education and outreach aspect. So I ended up in the swine industry, where I am the director, producer, and public health for the National Pork Board. Been there for about 4 years now, and it's really thanks to my background in the public health space that allowed me to transition into the food animal world, having gone through all the food safety rotations. So for the vet students, don't skip those rotations if they're electives. You never know where you'll end up. And so I'm really excited to be here. I'm also boarded in veterinary preventative medicine. I'm on the maintenance of certification committee for that. And I am the chair and co-chair and lots of leadership roles in various volunteer organizations such as the United States Association of Animal Health and other organizations. But really excited to be here again with this amazing cast that we have today, and looking forward to jumping in the questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fowler. Last but definitely not least, Dr. Patricia Mundy.
I've done nothing with my life. Just listening to you guys is all amazing. I also low-key am obsessed with AdVox, so now I know I'm booking my flight to Nashville. So my name is Patricia Mundy. I grew up in Zambia, but I went to school in London, and I finished, I went to vet school at Cambridge and internship at the Royal Vet College. And then I moved to UW-Madison, where I did an ocular pathology fellowship at the medical school. And then I did my residency in comparative ophthalmology at Cornell. I practiced in Manhattan for a couple of years, and I realized I missed teaching. So I was faculty at Penn for about 3 or 4 years. And concurrent with my faculty position, I completed a master's at Penn Law in diversity and inclusion and contract law. My current career is a little bit of a misnomer, and it's kind of testifies that just because you went to vet school doesn't mean you have to be a veterinarian. I still do probably about some clinical practice, but I got involved with the Richard Branson group in the Bell Project. So we're currently working on a high school diploma for prisoners in Philadelphia, and also on the Diversity and Inclusion Board for Cambridge and Penn Law, and also ACVO, Diversity and Inclusion Task Force.
Thank you very much. So I guess, audience, you could see why this is going to be a fantastic night. So let's get started with some of the questions. And what I'll do is I have a list of questions that I'll go over with our panelists tonight. And then Steffi, that you were introduced earlier in the program, she'll actually fill some questions from you through the chat box. So if you have any questions, just send them our way. And then we also were able to harvest some questions with the survey that came with the registration. So we'll pull some of those questions also. So for my first question, as a BIPOC woman, what aspects of your cultural identities did you find were most influential to your career and beyond? So Dr. Tan, I'll start with you.
All right. So I guess we can all admit that I don't look like your expected horse vet. And so I would say that the two big cultural identities for me that played a part were the fact that I'm female and the fact that I'm Chinese Canadian, Chinese American. My parents are from Malaysia and Brunei, so Southeast Asia. I grew up myself in Papua New Guinea, England, and Canada. And I spent 14 years in the US. So I have a pretty international background and pretty different from your average horse vet. So, the equine profession is still somewhat male dominated, even though that's changing, but more so male dominated among practice owners. So, I was an anomaly, I would say, as being a female practice owner, and especially as a woman of color practice owner. So I was definitely a unicorn in upstate New York as especially a rural practice owner. The equine profession is, as most of you probably know, even more Caucasian, predominantly white than the rest of the veterinary profession. So I am part of the 5.5% that is a person of color, and I'm part of the 0.4% that's Asian. So I would definitely say that those two things, being a female practice owner and being Asian, have definitely influenced my career.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I think we all could, most of us can definitely relate to that here on the panel. So I'm going to move to Dr. Mundy.
I mean, so I guess for me, growing up in Africa and kind of I was one of those kids that wasn't expected to go to university. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment. It was me, my mother, my 2 sisters, my cousin, my grandparents. Nobody expected me to go to Cambridge or let alone achieve. And one of the things that sort of stuck with me is with education comes responsibility, and just trying to be a mentor and supporting other people that may look like me and sound like me, and also educating people that don't look like me or sound like me. And I think one of the things that we try not to talk about as minorities, especially women in leadership, is the dirty little secret that we have to work harder than everybody else. And that's kind of fact. And I think that's driven my work ethic. So that's kind of the biggest thing that's kind of still stuck with me. And once you kind of let go of the feelings of injustice that you have to work harder than everybody else, it's amazing just how much that can actually drive you and get to where you need to get to. So those are the 2 biggest things that I think have kind of stuck.
Yeah, that's very true. And I see we have head nods across the board there for that comment. I actually like the comment you made with education becomes responsibility. So we may dig into that one a little bit later, because I have the other questions I want to get to. But that's a very impactful statement that I'd like to maybe pick your brains about that statement and get some insight from you, if you don't mind. So I'm going to move to Dr. Woc-Colburn. What cultural identities did you find that were most influential for your career?
So I'm sorry, my dog keeps wanting to pop in and out. So for me, so obviously, I was born in Guatemala and Panama, but I grew up in California. But one of the things is, from my family background, I call myself almost a mutt, because from my father's side, I'm Chinese Guatemalan with a little bit of Mayan. With my mom's side, I'm Panamanian American Spanish, and I always say with a little drop or with a little bit of Scottish, which for whatever reason as a kid I sort of globbed onto. But sort of going along with what everybody else was saying is sort of being a woman and then also being multiracial. It's something that you don't see as often in, like, even in Sioux medicine, as much as there's a lot more females, but when you start seeing leadership roles, it's changing, but it usually tends to be a little bit more male predominated because of where the Sioux field was. And even when getting jobs or anything, I know when I first was doing interviews after my residency, from curators, the perspective was that the male counterpart was better. They were always concerned that as a woman, that I might not be able to do the job or might not be able to understand their point of view or anything. So that's definitely been a challenge. It's something that's changing, but even in my current position, as much as the whole veterinary team is female, you definitely see the changes of how communication happens and having to try harder, or sometimes trying to be, I don't know if the word is aggressive, but being a little bit more direct, which for my personality tends to be a little bit like a 180 turn. I also, going through schooling and everything, in the 90s, there was a lot of affirmative action, and me getting into UPenn, I remember that people would say, oh, is it just because of affirmative action? And it was almost wanting to prove that, no, I earned that spot with my own merit versus because of what color I am or where I came from. And it was something that for a while I actually wouldn't mark the box, just to be like, hey, I'm the same. Don't do that, which is sometimes sad, because it's something that, the cultural heritage is so much of who each of us are, and having to sometimes curve that so that we don't get the almost like the negative feedback from that. But I mean, those things did drive me. I mean, it sort of goes along with what Dr. Mundy said. It's sort of, that responsibility, but it's also getting that drive. to help teach the next generation and open those doors. You know, over years, the SUVET, like the AACV, which is the SUVETs, is composed of a lot of international students, so there's a lot of diversity in there. And I've been seeing more and more, some of them start studying in the US so that they can get jobs within the American or sometimes the Canadian SUs, and it's definitely slowly building up. Definitely wanting more of that female multicultural group, because I see more, a little bit more males from that area, from that diversity. So it's definitely trying to encourage them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And when you talked about that, the affirmative action and statements that were made to you, I remember moving from private practice into industry. You know, I was a little bit younger then, and and a comment was made to me, oh, well, you know why you were hired? Because you're pretty and Black. Yeah, so just really discounting my degree and the education and all the abilities I have. So so again, and then, you know, and I guess I'll ask the panel, when situations like that happen, how do you handle that? Because I know that's a question, right? You know, we always handle it in different ways. So when you get comments like that, how do you handle those comments?
I guess from my end, I try to make a joke out of it, or sometimes I ignore it. Depends on how the comment was. If it was done sort of like with not thinking, I mean, for some of my friends that if I had a better relationship with, I could actually explain to them a little bit more from the point of view or everything that I've done. It sometimes goes along with the questions that sometimes I got from being Latina, in terms of like, how did you get to the US? Or are you truly a citizen or American? And, you know, I always got the question of like, how was the crossing? And I'm like, oh, the plane ride was fine. You know, I was like, yeah, sure, a little turbulence, but it's almost having, I think sometimes I try to ignore it or dependent on the situation, because sometimes I would probably dig myself a deeper hole or make it into more of an issue or not. So it depended on the tone and the situation, I think, for me.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say, I agree. It really depends on who are the folks that are involved in that conversation and how comfortable you feel speaking up. It's something that I've dealt with in my career, right? Many of us have, of just maybe not feeling like you belong there. I work in agriculture. I'm very happy here in New Jersey. I live in a concrete jungle. It's what, you know, it's what I live for. I love being able to walk to the nearby bar or just the grocery store, all those types of things. It's very different than the industry that I live in. And so when I get in front of a crowd, my colleagues can say, I was born and raised in this. I did FFA, I did this. And you know what? I had to come to a point where I told myself I belong here. I deserve to be here, right? We all shared our credentials, our backgrounds. Like, nope, I'm here because I may not have grown up in this industry, but best believe I can contribute to it and I will do a good job. And so when people make those kind of offhand comments, yeah, it definitely depends on the situation. But I've been, and you kind of handle it on a case by case basis, but I've been learning how to really speak up for myself and remind myself that I do belong here in this situation. I even had a colleague during my time in Washington that said, as long as at the end of the day, you can sleep at night, right? Because we all go back and we'll rehearse that conversation of, man, I should have said this, right? Because it gets your heart rate going and you're so busy, like your hands are shaking, your palms are sweaty because you weren't expecting it. It catches your body off guard physiologically. And so you have to think in that moment. And I cannot think in that moment all the time, but you, in some ways, through experience, you become more prepared and ready for it. And again, as long as you can sleep at the end of the night, knowing you at least spoke up for yourself, or however you handled it, that you're comfortable. If you cracked a joke or, that's not funny. Well, that was racist. I've said that before, right? When you're like, that's not okay. And even if you try to inject a little bit of humor, to alert the person that it's not okay, or it's incorrect, or it is racist or derogatory, or what have you. Just learning to be prepared, unfortunately, for those comments and sleep at night as a result of knowing that you stood up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the head on the nail there. And for Dr. Fowler, I'll actually just stick with you for the next question. Did any of your identities present specific barriers or challenges in your journey to become a veterinarian? And then how have these challenges evolved now in your current role?
I think some of the challenges, I mean, I guess one of the things is, and I've noticed a lot of this with my BIPOC colleagues, is you may be the first generation to go to college, right? So I was the first one to go to, my sister and my brother both went to college, but I was the first one to go to school beyond that point. So I didn't have that person that I could call up. Being in New Jersey, not necessarily knowing other people that look like me in the profession, right? I honestly thought of, you know, growing up as a child, I thought I was going to be the first Black female veterinarian. I really did. In a state like New Jersey, I grew up in Trenton, guys. I don't know if you've seen the demographic of Trenton, but when you step into a veterinary practice, no one there looks like you at all. And so, you know, unfortunately, it was a bit of a disadvantage, but I think Dr. Mundy said before that, you know, sometimes it motivates you, and that's exactly, well, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And if anything, I'm going to pay it forward to that next generation. So I make sure I get active and volunteer and mentor students, especially those from different backgrounds, so that they understand that there are other folks that either look like you or from different backgrounds that maybe didn't come from a long line of veterinarians or, you know, lawyers and doctors and this, that, and the other. You might be the first, and that's okay. It might be tough, but I'm going to help you along the way.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And Dr. Mundy, what do you think about this topic?
So I'm kind of in a weirdly unique position where obviously being in academia, I remember in academia there was only, when I was at Penn, there was only 2 minority faculty. One had dreadlocks. I had like my Beyonce weave. We looked very different, but everybody got us mixed up. And I think what for me has been my biggest growth point is people have an idea of what a Black woman should look and sound like. Yeah. And with me, the narrative I always got is I was an uppity Black because I have an English accent, and that's really jarring because they don't quite know where to place me or what to put me in. And you kind of, it's trying to figure out how much you're going to let that eat you up, or whether you're just going to be like, it is what it is, I'm not going to change minds. And also the biggest lesson that I learned is you can't fight and win every battle. And it's okay to just walk away from a job because it's toxic, or walk away from an interaction because it's toxic. Just because you're the first of whatever you're the first of, you don't have to fight every battle. And I think there's almost a feeling of like you have this feeling that you're not good enough to be there, and then you feel like you're not good enough because you're not fighting for everything. But it's okay to walk away, and I think that was probably the hardest lesson that I learned.
Yeah, I like that. It's okay to walk away. Yeah, I like that. So for Dr. Tan, I'll ask you this question. As a BIPOC woman, we're often asked to be stronger than everyone else, because we've talked about that, you know, we've actually touched upon it already, and to weather the toughest challenge, right, with a smile. And this makes a strong support system. It makes it very crucial for us to have this very strong support system. So what is your support system, and then how do you lean on it, and when?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. We do have to, you know, same as what Dr. Mundy described. The only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because of persistence, right? Like persistence through being the only non-white person in the barn when I used to ride, or like, you know, going through all those stages of my career, being, you know, getting through vet school, getting through being a practice owner, and even in academia now, I think it's always is always harder. For me, I've really liked, and this is quite recent for me, but joining some of these DEI task forces has really connected me with other people who have that same experience. And now we're like texting each other all the time. You know, whenever something happens, you know, like even in the world in the last few weeks or in the last year, there's been so many events that have happened. And when you're surrounded by fellow colleagues who just don't understand, you know, they have a very different perspective of the world from you, it's very isolating. So for me, it's been important to reach out and find other people who are in similar positions. And I honestly didn't have many connections like that until recently. And it's been incredible. Like, you know, I feel like even though I've never met these people because it's been through COVID, I've never personally met most of the people on these task forces, but I feel like I have such a strong connection with them. And I think once you find your allies or like your people, you just don't want to let go of that it can just be so supportive. And now I know who to reach out to when I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, I like that. That shows the value of having that support system. And Dr. Fowler.
I would echo that same sentiment. I think for me, it's been family, but definitely friends and colleagues. And as Dr. Tan said, people that get it, right? So that shared experience is really what binds a lot of people. It's amazing to me to meet other Black men and women in the veterinary profession, in medicine, and different aspects and different professions, and realize how you know, how real that shared experience is. Like, oh, I didn't realize we all said this, or, you know, there was this huge common thread that I thought it was just me and my family that used this phrase or what have you. And so, you know, having that support system through friends and family has been crucial for me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And Dr. Mundy, I'm going to ask you this one. How does your intersectional identity of being both BIPOC and a woman affect your leadership style? And are there any particular stereotypes that you've had to push against? And you actually touched upon that already a little bit, where you talked about kind of the vision that some people have as Black women, what we should look like, what we should sound like, how we should act. But do you have any other insights you could give into that?
And I think the interesting thing is, obviously, majority of what I do as an ophthalmologist is surgery. And as a female surgeon, I can't be pissed because the packs aren't like sterilized appropriately. I can't be, you know, I can't raise my voice to nurses and technicians because you kind of fall into this kind of like angry Black woman. And so it's that for me, it's been the kind of like the interesting part of that narrative. And that's just kind of a sign of that there's not enough women doing clinical surgery because it's very much a male dominated. And we had a surgeon who'd like throw stuff around in the OR, but he was like, oh my God, he's so lovely. And I'm like, but I think one of the things is because of my experiences, I have so much more empathy for my students. I have empathy for them when they're struggling through rotations. I have empathy for them when they're struggling through on call or if there's stuff happening outside work. And especially being a minority woman in academia, you kind of have a daily struggle, and you don't want to sit idly by and see people that you mentor who are under your charge struggle. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I wouldn't change about being a minority woman in academia.
Yeah, I like that. How about you, Dr. Tan?
Sorry, just trying to find my unmute button. You know, funny enough, I'm very much not the classic stereotype of Asian women. I don't even know where that stereotype came from because I don't know any Asian women who are like that. And so not like that. I'm more assertive than that. And I have found that I am pushed towards that stereotype. Like is jarring to people that I'm not that stereotype. And so they'll try to squash me until I'm that. Like I can't tell you how many times I get in trouble for ridiculous things that, you know, as Dr. Mundy said, like other people are praised for. Like they're like lauded for this. And if I just speak up at the wrong time, or, you know, I actually want to get something done, I'm squashed to try to be, you know your place, like be at your level.
Yeah. I think again we got a lot of head nods on the panel on that particular case. So I'm gonna move to the next question. As far as resources, because our audience is here to listen to our story and have this discussion, but then where do they go? So do you have resources that you think that are helpful to BIPOC individuals seeking leadership roles? Dr. Fowler, do you have any resources that you recommend?
Is it cliche if I say MCVMA? Because I think for me, but let's be honest, I've been, as a part of my job and just my professional career, I tack on to these organizations, right? You pay your dues for the state, if you do AVMA, you do this, you do that, and you get involved because you want to, you know, bolster your CV or what, this, that, and the other. But I'm starting to step back and say, what can I do that makes me feel good at the end of the day? How can I give back? And I mentioned wanting to mentor. And so I do plan on, and full disclosure, Dr. Tina Tran is a very good friend of mine, met her through the EVMA Future Leaders Program, and she's been, you know, we've been attached at the hip ever since. So she tries to push me to apply for, you know, various leadership roles within MCVMA. But right now I got to tie bows on other things because I didn't know how to say no early on. And so now I'm learning how to say no and say, you know what, if I'm going to volunteer, it's going to be something that I'm all about. So I would recommend, you know, if someone's interested in me, you have a shared experience, you're from New Jersey, have the same experience, definitely feel free to reach out to me. But again, I think MCVMA, the Facebook page, the organization has some great resources out there. There's a National Association of Black Veterinarians. There's various different groups, allied groups within the profession that can be very specific to your background and experience that are there to support you. And so that's really what I would recommend and that I've found to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. And I know our audience appreciates that. Dr. Mundy. Yeah, I was like, Dr. Mundy.
You said something so amazing is one of the kind of little rabbit holes you get down when you start getting involved in diversity and inclusion is you get asked to do lots of stuff and then you stretch yourself too thin. And you are so right in that no is the full sentence. There doesn't have to be like a bookend to it, just like no. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually capturing that one, Dr. Fowler. I'm definitely planning to use that one. Dr. Mundy, do you have anything to add to that, like as far as resources?
I think for me is when I kind of approached veterinary medicine, I went into wanting to find mentorship, that somebody that looked and sounded like me. And I ended up with a mentor who is a partner at Deloitte, knows absolutely nothing about veterinary medicine. And he's the kind of person that I can call. I didn't have to explain about veterinary medicine because he will never get it. So he just kind of like deals with the situation. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I think also Dr. Williams, when we talked, it's about going to conferences and then also having an idea of the change you want to see. Like when you approached the head of your global head of your institution saying, I think we should have more diverse women in leadership. And you didn't just give him like a problem, you also gave him a solution of how to resolve that. And so just knowing that your voice is valuable and there's people that will listen to your voice and position yourself so these people will listen to your voice. So just go to all the conferences that you can, and if you listen to somebody speak and you like what they say, stalk them, track them down, find them, and just people always make time to speak to people.
I like that. Your voice is valuable. Dr. Tan.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. On top of that, you know, I would say once there's someone who believes in you, to let them help you. Like for for me, I was very fortunate that I had someone who believed in me when I started at University of Calgary, and they they got me into all these leadership things. Like I've been to veterinary leadership experience, I've completed the AAVMC Leadership Academy. Like I've just done like all of the different leadership conferences and panels that I could. And I think part of that is just letting people know early on, especially a trusted mentor, of your goals. Like, you know, nothing comes, I think, of hiding and pretending like you have no ambition and you're perfectly happy being, you know, the instructor that you started off as. So that's what I would say is, you know, try to make that known. That, and I know that sometimes that's hard, especially with women. Like sometimes people do want to squash you down when they know that you are striving for something, right? Like I remember seeing something about Hillary Clinton when that it was like a very data driven study that showed that every time she reached for power, her popularity decreased. But every time she got to that stage that she was supposed to be at, then everybody was perfectly happy when she got there. She wasn't allowed to reach. And so I'd say be careful who you entrust with that information. Like I think I've been fairly careful who I entrust with that information, and let them help you.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I like to have to look up that study. That's really interesting. But I would agree if you kind of follow Hillary Clinton's her path, right? Her path, and you can see some of that vitriol that comes at her in that place. So Dr. Woc-Colburn, I'm going to turn to you and ask you this question. So if you could go back and could give your younger self some type of advice, what would you say? And also, what would you do differently?
See, and that one was a hard one because I wanted to change a lot of things. But if I had to tell my younger self, I think a lot of it is don't listen so hard or don't let it affect you so much when people tell you you can't do. I know it's something that, I mean, I think my older self is a little bit better, but I still struggle with. But I tended to internalize a lot of the naysayers. So that would be like one of the biggest pieces of advice is just ignore them. Just say, okay, whatever. And just telling my younger self to go for it, not to overthink. Just to not worry about what others will think or if that's the right one or what. Just because it was something that I always struggled with when people would tell me you can't. You're so cute. Saying that, oh, you know, are you sure you want to do this? Or, you know, are you capable of doing this? And I would have to be like, yes, you know, and struggle with it and be like, are they right? For some of the changes, I mean, a lot of it was more of that overthinking and mulling. I think I spent more time inside my head rerunning and then being like, I know earlier we said about the inner conversations and all the things that we talk. I think I wasted so much time for that I think I would have been able to do more and not worry and not stress so much for that. So, I mean, and I figured in my path, despite the roadblocks and everything, it's led me to who I am today and where I want to be. And a lot of it is just telling myself, you know, reach for the stars. Doesn't matter if someone tells you you can't do it. If you're a girl that you can't make it. Or I know in Latin America, being an MD was great, but when you said, hey, I want to be a veterinarian, they're like, why do you want to work with animals? And, you know, and it's changing that. And obviously that's changed a lot with wildlife and conservation, where they're like, oh, wow, that's a cool thing. But early on, it was more like, why? And, you know, I got lucky for the support that I had during that time to ignore them, but it definitely was a stressful time.
Yeah, and I like that. Like you said, it's your past experiences and some of the obstacles. It builds who you become, right? It builds who we are today as we sit here on this panel. And you see my son, he was a ham, right? Popping in the camera there. So, Dr. Fowler, what advice?
Can I say ditto? Because I think
Yeah.
you covered it. I think Dr. Woc-Colburn covered it to a T for me. I think I had some of the same experiences. So nothing to add here, really.
Yeah, I like this question. So, and then Dr. Mundy, what do you say about that?
Ditto times two. And I think also just being fearless and just
Yeah.
telling yourself that everything will be okay, because it inevitably always is.
Yeah.
And there's always a plan that's out of your hands. I'm not massively religious, but I think what is meant for you is meant for you. And the biggest thing is this is probably a slight diversion. So I've struggled with mental health for probably most of my adult life. And I think I stayed in jobs that I shouldn't have stayed in, just for wanting to do something different, and also kind of knowing that no job is worth more than you. And so if it's not working, it's not meant for you. Be fearless.
Yeah, fearless, and no job is worth it, right? I love that. Love it. I'm getting so many really good kind of taglines and during this panel tonight. And then Dr. Woc-Colburn, I'm actually going to come back to you for this question also. And what advice would you offer young, aspiring BIPOC veterinarians who may see those current barriers? So you talked about your younger self and, you know, some of the obstacles and how it's really developed who you are today. So what advice would you give a young aspiring BIPOC veterinarian who sees current barriers in the fields and they may see those as deterrents? So how would you, what kind of advice would you give them?
So one of the things I would say is find a mentor that jives with you. Is one thing that for me, when I see the different paths in my life and when I had problems, or, you know, like say for undergrad, I got, you know, they sort of, when you start your freshman year, they say this is your mentor, or even in high school. And sometimes they were not the right people because they were not the ones who understood you.
Yeah.
But then I would find, you know, a professor or anything, and they were like your biggest cheerleader, and they would open doors for you. So, and for some of those, some from vet school, they've become some of my best friends. But it's definitely it's someone that you can talk to beyond like, this is what I want to do, you know, go and be a veterinarian, but that they can sort of help you also grow as a person, you know, besides the veterinarians. And then at least for the zoo field, you know, one of the things that, especially if you're pre-vet or starting in vet school or even early on, is going to the conference and doing networking. I always tell the students that I get as externs that if they're able to volunteer, they sometimes get more out of that, out of the conference, where they get one-on-one time with some of the clinicians that are like, when you're a student and you're like, wow, that's a big name clinician and they're scary, and you know, and then they're bombarded by like 20 other students and you're like, I really wanted to talk to them. Having that one-on-one time opens up, because they're like, oh cool, hey, want to grab a drink with me or anything at dinner, and it opens doors for that. So those would be the two big things I would tell young aspiring veterinarians.
Yeah, I like that. And there's, you know, again, I hear a common theme tonight where we talk about kind of paving the way for those behind us with that mentorship and that networking. So I like hearing that. And Dr. Fowler, what about you?
Well, to add on that, because again, spot on, Dr. Woc-Colburn. I would say, similar to the conference, don't feel uncomfortable going up to them and speaking, at least introducing yourself, right? You see a long line. I just wanted to introduce myself. You have a business card? Can I follow up? Don't feel like you can't follow up by email looking something up, right? I think of, you know, when you read a paper, you want to learn more about it. You can contact that author and ask about it. So even as a student, you know, maybe have your questions laid out. Don't just get on and say, well, I don't know. Have a plan, know why you want to contact that person, and don't hesitate essentially to reach out to someone, especially if they're in a position that you're interested in, right? So I tell people to think about where they want to go and what they want to do, and then talk to a bunch of people. Because if you talk to someone else in public health or someone else in swine medicine, you might find out that they got there very different ways. Everyone on this call today has really interesting backgrounds, but if you look at someone else with the same, in this current role, that same role, they may have gotten there in a different way. So I always encourage folks to reach out to someone, especially someone that's in the position that they're interested in filling one day, and never feeling uncomfortable about reaching out or cold calling even.
Yeah, I like that. Dr. Mundy.
Sorry, I feel like I'm saying ditto again. I think you've explained really well, and I think it's also just knowing that you deserve that seat at the table. Because I think when we're trying to kind of staff and leadership, is you're having insecurities about whether or not this is the path for you, and if you feel it and you want to do it, then you can most definitely do it. And just reaching out to people that are doing what you're doing. And when you email people, most people will love the opportunity to just talk about themselves.
Yes.
So they will reply to that email. And so just kind of making those connections. And also one thing that I wish I'd have known earlier is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just amazing for just like networking with people in different fields and just sending them messages and just setting up calls. So LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to meet people that if they're doing what you want to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I've reached out to people, and I don't take it personal if they don't they don't respond.
I would say I'm terrible. I'm terrible at LinkedIn. So give me about 60 days if you reach out that way, because I missed that email notification. I will find it though, and then I'll just give you my email and say contact me that way. So
okay, well, then I won't take it personal, Dr. Fowler, because it was you. No, I'm kidding. So actually, I'm going to turn it over to Steffi now, because she was able to get some questions. I'm not sure if any questions came through the chat, but I know there were some questions that came through the survey. And Steffi, you don't have to come on camera if you don't want to, but just maybe turn your audio on and maybe ask some questions.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
We can, and we can see you.
Okay,
Hello.
great. I have to get myself together because this was such an amazing panel, and it cannot go too long. So I think I'm really happy to see that there are a few questions that came in, and a slew of questions that came in through our survey. So if you're ready, I'm just going to go ahead and pick, starting with the questions in our chat right now. I see a question here from Danja that says, I'm a 32-year-old married Black lesbian female and now soon to be mom, and I'll be applying to vet school in North Carolina in a few years. So what advice would you give to help with balancing life as a wife, mom, and soon to be full-time in vet school?
And I'll just throw it out to the group. Does anyone want to tackle that one?
I'm going to leave this one alone because I have a Yorkshire Terrier and that's it. So I'm going to stand down.
Yeah,
and I have a Chihuahua, so you and I both
your four-legged babies there. Dr. Tan or Dr. Woc-Colburn?
That's all I've got.
Dr. Woc-Colburn?
I'm sort of going like, I have my German Shepherd that I'm having like an issue with.
I guess I could say though, I think it goes back to that mentorship. So maybe we can't help you today with the specific answer, but I'm sure there's other folks that have done it and could help. And if you're at North Carolina, I would say go ahead and reach out to me, because I might be able to connect you with a friend of mine that just graduated from there not too long ago, and she's another African-American woman. So again, if you need help finding mentors, always feel free to reach out to different folks. But I think that's the most I can help in terms of advice tonight.
Yeah.
I feel like this might be a question for our moderator, Dr.
Yeah,
Williams.
I was going to jump right in there, Dr. Tan. So as a wife, a mother, I'm in corporate America and, have a very demanding job. So it goes back to what we've said tonight, and I think Dr. Mundy said it very well. It's and then Dr. Fowler said it, that no is a sentence, because I do sometimes find that hard, and you do get pulled in a lot of different directions. But I would say recognize your bandwidth. Recognize your bandwidth, and something that since the pandemic specifically, that I've done a better job at is more of that mental wellness, right? And just taking that time out just for you, because I have 2 sons, and you see they always want to be with mommy. That's why you had had Mason pop into the camera here, and then husband is needy, so there's a lot of need. And then I have 2 male cats, and they're needy, so there's a lot of neediness going on in the household. And then, like I said, with the addition of a high impact job, so just protect yourself, protect your well-being. And then also, we talked about networking on a professional level, building up a personal network to help with those responsibilities, family, friends, to kind of help and step in to help out with, babysitting the kid, picking the kids up from school and things like that. It really makes a big difference to have that personal network, in addition to the professional that we were talking about. But you definitely need that support system. So when you hear that saying that it takes a community, it's true. It really is, because you can't do it by yourself. Steffi.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to move right along to the next question, which actually is kind of connected to this. So a lot of people want to hear from you all. Lots of people want to connect and just, find camaraderie or support through your stories and yourselves. So they're asking for emails. So what I sent out there is, if they reach out to MCVMA outreach@gmail.com, that way, just send us an email through that email. We can put that in a chat for you. Again, that's MCVMA outreach@gmail.com. Just let us know if you'd like to get in touch with our panelists, and then we can connect you that way versus putting the email directly in the chat. And of course, there are the LinkedIn profiles in there. So just scroll up a little bit and you'll find them there. So good way to keep in touch. So just to let you all know, people really want to hear from you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead to the next question here, which reads, what would you recommend for those of us who don't have any family support, especially if we're trying to find mentors in the same culture our family thinks does not, some cultures, as this person is describing, don't think they belong in this field, or if I'm reading that correctly. So what would you recommend for those who are trying to find, who don't have that support from family, looking for support elsewhere or with mentorship?
I can probably take this one, because I guess when I moved into my fellowship, I didn't have any family in the States. So I literally packed a suitcase and turned up in Madison, Wisconsin, wearing like a rugby shirt and like cowboy boots, and because I like country music, and it was like January and it snowed for like 6 months. And I think the first thing that I will say is, you can find mentors that aren't in the veterinary field. Just find mentors that believe in what you want to do and believe in who you are and will support you, that will like get people. When I have my mentor, as I said earlier, he's not a veterinarian, he's a corporate guy, he's a partner at Deloitte, but I'll call him and he'll be in a different time zone and he'll pick up the phone and we'll just talk about stuff that's happening and he'll give me advice. So don't limit yourself by thinking you should have mentors that look like you or sound like you and are even in the veterinary field. You just need somebody who will listen and kind of guide you in the way, and somebody who cares. That's kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Dr. Mundy. I too, like, I drove 5.5 days to get from Western Canada to Ithaca, New York. So I was far from family too, and it was during 9/11. Yeah, my mentor looks nothing like me. She was my mentor through vet school. She's the whole reason why I did large animal internal medicine as my field. And you they don't need to look like you. I think it's great if you can find someone that you can relate to in that way, but you don't need to. It can just be somebody that you look up to, and you know, for me, she not only is incredibly successful, but is extremely kind, like just extremely kind in every way. The way she interacts with her horses as well, you know, patients, clients, and with colleagues and students. And so I just, you know, found her to be a great role model and a great mentor who would support me. And so, yeah, definitely doesn't need to be someone that is exactly on your path.
Yeah, I like that. Does anyone else have any advice?
So I was going to second a lot what's been said. So for me, I ended up going from California all the way to the East Coast. So all my family was way 3,000 miles away. So even before I got my mentor, some of the networks were, for me, ended up being my roommates, but sometimes some of the friends help you give that almost like that emotional or family support. And then it was finding mentors. I know for undergrad, the mentor I ended up like clicking with, definitely completely different from me. His name was John Smith. I mean, he was from Canada. Like he did a lot of like, he loved stories and natural history and everything, but he was like the biggest fan during undergrad and was like, sure, you want to do a master's? Okay, here you go. This is what it can help you with. And then in vet school, because I knew I liked Sioux medicine, but I ended up, my big mentor was Dr. Abu Mahdi. And I mean, and there were definitely other clinicians, and they were the ones that I still call if I ever have any questions, if I just want to talk. Actually, Dr. Abu Mahdi is one of my best friends, so it's one of those that even beyond, she's become like almost that if I ever have a question or even just talking about, hey, this is what's going on non-clinical wise, she's always there to listen. So it's just finding the people in your path. They usually end up showing up, I don't know, but it's just finding those that click. And I would say for the most part, they never seem to look like me, but they definitely offer a different perspective. Each of them offered from their experiences, but sometimes help me get out of my shell and sort of look at a bigger picture.
Very nice. Steffi, do you have another question for our panel?
Yes. So we're gonna take a quick intermission, very, very quick, just to let everybody know in the chat here. We have a post-event survey that we run for all of our events at MCVMA, because we always like to improve to make sure we know where we're helping and where we can work some more on. So we're having the event, the post-event survey put in the chat right about in the next few seconds. So just take a second to click on it, have it in your browser somewhere, and go back to listening to this webinar, and you can fill it in later. Okay, and we'll put the link again a little bit later on in the chat for you, just to remind you. So that's that. Let me move on to the next question here. So great questions and lots of engagement from the attendees. So how does a mentor-mentee relationship look like? And this person is wondering, what should they look for in a good mentor relationship?
And I'll just open again it up to any of the panelists that wants to answer that question.
I really think it depends on the person, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can say for myself, like I've been pretty independent. Like I can't say that I have had a lot of interaction with any of my mentors really, you know, over time. And so I think it's a very individual thing. I felt like there were people around that I could ask if I needed it. You know, the one through vet school, I can't say that I asked a lot for advice after vet school. And so I think it's a very individual thing. If you really hit it off with someone and you feel comfortable asking them for advice all throughout the stages of your career, then that's amazing. You know, I've certainly kept in touch with all my mentors, but I think my individual style has been different. So don't feel like you have to follow any sort of formula. Don't even feel like you have to find a mentor.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Woc-Colburn said, sometimes your support network is going to come from friends and colleagues and stuff like that. You don't have, like, I feel like we might make you feel like you're in trouble if you don't have a mentor. You're not in trouble if you don't have a mentor.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I was going to add a little bit, the sort of the mentor-mentee relationship. It is so individual. So it's sort of seconding Dr. Tan's, because it's based on your personality and theirs. The different mentors that I've had some that were very offhand, and a lot of it is I already had like my plan of what I wanted to do. So they just sort of help fill in the gaps. Or sometimes if I was at a part where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, but I can't figure out what the next step, or needing some advice. I remember as a vet student was like, should I take small animal like internship or large animal? You know, going into zoo you need both, and it's like, how can I get both? You know, and sometimes the best one that they just told me was like, pick which one you feel comfortable with and which one, you know, you want to pursue. Doesn't matter which. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, never thought about that. So sometimes they can give you that quick answer or that outlook from them. Sometimes with the mentor mentee, the mentors can give you almost like what they've gone through, or they can open doors up. Sometimes they're very good for opening relationships or like networking or meeting new people. I know one of the things that I noticed, like when I first started my zoo residency, actually Oklahoma City Zoo, I got lucky enough. It usually wasn't, sorry, my dog is going to bark because of storm. But I wasn't supposed to go to the Zoo Vet conference on my first year, but the other clinicians hadn't wanted to go. So they're like, here, you go along. And another Sioux veterinarian close to Oklahoma City Zoo sort of took me under her wing during like the icebreaker, where when I had gone as a vet student, I was like, wow, all these like famous clinicians, I don't know who they are. And she just went and introduced me to her, and that opened so many doors that people were like, oh, you're this one. So something as simple as just saying, hey, look, this is, you know, Dr. Fowler, and then this is like, you know, meeting for that, and you're like, wow, I finally got to meet the person from the book. So it's so individual, I think. So it's one of those that it's whatever feels right for you at whatever moment you need, and you can use them for something just like, hey, this is what the major I want to take to, versus something of mentors that you can stay in touch throughout your life. And that's just that organic way that you mesh together.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm
Dr.
trying to help. Oh, go on,
I was
Dr.
just
Fowler.
confirming that you weren't referring to me. You were referring to the zoo vet, Dr. Fowler, right?
Yes,
but yeah, feel free to introduce folks to me as well. No relation, but none at all.
And I was going to say that that actually your statements just had a lot of weight there, because I'm helping to start like a mentorship program where I am, and the first thing that I would probably recommend is for you to write down what that relationship looks like to you, right? So you need to define it, because as Dr. Tan said, and Dr. Woc-Colburn and Dr. Fowler, all kind of, you know, consistent themes here is that it's going to be variable. So it's going to be, and then mentorship depends on where you are in your leadership journey, right? So you'll have a different mentor when you're starting versus when you've gotten to that top tier leadership position. But the best way to even start and have that foundation is to write it down and see how you define it, and start from there. Yeah, so I like that. Steffi, because we have a little bit more time.
Yes, we do. And those are all amazing advice. So I'm going to take the time to make 2 comments here from the audience. So Melissa says, thank you so much for that, Dr. Tan. That was a comment that you made earlier that resonated with her. So I just wanted to say that. There was a follow-up for, I think, one of our very, very first questions, or kind of an explanation that you know, this person says their family is very upset with them for being in this field because they didn't come to America for them to waste, quote unquote, waste time with animals. I just wanted to put that out there that they wanted to kind of offer additional information. And I see a lot of head nodding. This is not a, it's not a new idea. I'm sure it's been heard before, but if there are any comments, any thoughts on that, feel free. But that is a follow-up that they wanted to provide.
I mean, I remember vividly my Cambridge graduation. My dad came. Obviously, I'm Zambian. And he said to me, "Hey, Patty, what is this? We eat the animals in Africa. And I told your auntie you're a surgeon." I'm like, "You missed the veterinary bit." And it's like, no, you're a surgeon. In his head, he wanted me to be a surgeon. But ultimately, you reach a point where you have to live for you. And obviously, don't be disrespectful to your parents' wants and needs, but ultimately, you have to live for you. And so
I have a new comeback that I just learned, and I think I will use from now on. I posted it on my Twitter because I just learned it. The CEO of Pfizer and the CEO of AstraZeneca are veterinarians.
Yeah.
There we go.
So be incredibly successful as a veterinarian. I think that's what's really great about this career, right? Like, you can pick so many career paths, and each one of us has already been on so many different career paths. So just because your family thinks that you're going to end up being X small animal vet in X town, that doesn't mean that's what you're going to do, right? And I think introducing people and educating people about what that veterinary career means, and the fact that, you know, you can be the CEO of this incredible global company, or you could be, you know, a famous researcher. You could, you know, there's so many different paths that VetMed can take you to, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a great small animal vet impacting lives, you know, and impacting all the people and the animals around you.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree, just to reinforce what Dr. Tan said, is there's this kind of narrative that if you're a veterinarian, you have to be a clinician. And what you realize is veterinarians are problem solvers. And so whatever subspecialty you want to get into, you're a problem solver ultimately. And nobody thought I'd be transitioning to social justice and the law. But that's what veterinary medicine does. It teaches you to be a problem solver. And if you kind of go into it thinking you're going to be a small animal vet or large animal vet, then you are kind of limiting yourself. So there's so much you can do, and the veterinary degree carries so much weight when you apply for jobs outside veterinary medicine.
Yeah,
and I'll just add that what I love about the veterinary profession is it has that flexibility. I don't think some of the other professions, like you go down this track, that's where you're going. Whereas we can say, you know, maybe I'll work with horses tomorrow, right? Or I always wanted to live out my dream to be a zoo veterinarian. Easier said than done, I understand, but you know, you do have that flexibility at least, and so that's what makes it great. And you want to make sure that you're doing at the end of the day what you really love and enjoy.
Yeah, I love that. So Steffi, we're at 10 minutes to 9. So I didn't know if you want to maybe take one more question, then close out. I don't know how much time, if you want to maybe pick one more question. And
we have an opportunity to take 2 more questions. There's
okay.
a comment. There's one question in the waiting in the queue, and then there's one more question from we had a very, very long list of anonymous questions submitted, so I just wanted to make sure at least we tap into that. So if that's okay, we could just I'll mention that comment, and we'll have 2 final questions to close us out. Okay. So the comment, I just wanted to bring it up really quickly. This is from Dr. Tina Tran, who is our immediate past MCVMA president, who wanted to say a very, very big thank you to all the panelists and let you know that your words and experiences validate a lot of BIPOC. And I should mention BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, who have experienced similar things in veterinary medicine. So she says she's very proud to name each of you her colleagues. So The question comes in from Erica, and it's specifically for Dr. Woc-Colburn. So what's your biggest piece of advice for someone wanting to go into zoo medicine? I also identify as female and I'm from an underrepresented background. I've talked a lot to zoo vets, and hearing about the work-life balance, the pay, internship, residency struggles to find a job in the field, paying off student loans, etc. What I've heard is honestly more discouraging than anything pursuing this avenue of vet med. I guess I'm looking for some words of encouragement too from someone I look up to and want to be someday.
Good question, and yes, it's a hard one because I would say zoo medicine, it's definitely trying to find that balance. I think it's something that we zoo veterinarians struggle with and are learning, and especially that work-life balance we're trying to improve, and it's something, you know, definitely that will hopefully get better. And then I will apologize in case I cut off because we're getting hit by the second part of the storm with tornadoes. So if I suddenly go black, I'm okay. It's just my internet. So the part that's challenging, and this is something that I tell my students too, because it's something that definitely you have to think about with student loans nowadays, and internships is definitely hard to get. So I won't sugarcoat that one. It's definitely something that you might have to do double or triple internships before you get a residency. The one thing, the beauty about zoo medicine is there's a traditional path, and I somewhat follow that traditional path of going small animal internship. I did sort of veer a little bit and did emergency because I love that. Plus, it also helped to pay a little bit of my student loans, and it definitely made me a better clinician. And then I did the residency, but there's people that do the non-traditional, which means that you can either do a small, like you can either do an internship or try to volunteer or intern at a zoo and start going for that. I know there's some people that work in small animal or emergency, which you get paid a little bit more, and then they're able to sometimes help out some of the smaller zoos. Networking, definitely going to the zoo conferences and building that network helps to gain you more. If you do want to go through that traditional route of internships and residencies, I would say start even in vet school and doing presentations or papers, because that will help put you more towards the top. And I would say start now finding that work-life balance. Like I wish at school we had had a little bit more, I guess more guidance, like my natural tendency, and sometimes that fits too with emergency and zoo. It's sometimes like once you leave, you still end up touching base at, you know, checking your emails and not turning off. And it was something that I think too in my residency was sometimes told to me that even on the day off, I should actually check my emails. And it got so ingrained that now I'm trying to pull away. So it's something that having good habits before going into your internship or your residency or into the zoo one will make you a better vet. And then just find the non-traditional ways. You could also, if you want to work with wildlife, you can participate in some research and get your kicks through there, do small or large or whatever else you want to do, but subset for that. So sometimes you might need to get creative. And a lot of it is follow your passion. And it's, we definitely build like a network of sort of working with colleagues, and we're always trying to find new ways. So it's definitely a work in progress. But I would say if you want to do zoo medicine, keep going at it. Sometimes persevere. You might not get in the first time or the second time. Just find out other ways. It might just be finding a new path, but still being able to get your zoo medicine. And finding mentors, they will help you a lot.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Woc-Colburn. So as I promised, we are down to our final question. I have 8:53 on my clock here, so that gives us just about enough time to maybe squeeze in that last question. So this question may have been touched on a little bit, but the person is, I think, hoping to find a more specific answer on your advice on how to be taken seriously by clients. that do not view BIPOC women as professional or have different types of biases. So being, you know, the outward facing person having to deal with that or receiving that kind of response. So what would be your advice for this person?
You got a lot of smiles there, Steffi. Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll take this one. So for the longest time, because obviously I looked pretty young, and I had like clients think I was not the doctor. I wore like a pencil skirt, shirt, cufflinks, and I had like the long hair because I didn't want to look too ethnic to like scare the clients. And trying to mold yourself into what they want you to be is going to destroy you. And when I got to that point, I like took the weave out, shaved the hair, and yeah, you can't change yourself to be what they want you to be. So I think you need to let that go. I wish I could give you better advice of how to make it work, but you have to let it go. Like Frozen, let it go.
Are you sure you only have 4 legged kids?
I like Frozen.
I think this is a really good question, because it's something, you know, we all grapple with. I still grapple with. You know, I was 23 when I graduated vet school, and it was hard, and it still is. So my advice is not, it's just like, you just have to be good. You have to be good at what you do. That might mean that you have to put in more hours. That might mean you have to, and definitely to be perceived as good, you have to be better than everyone else to some extent. You know, you just have to be confident in yourself. And so for me, I just knew I was practicing excellent medicine, right? So even though I was questioned constantly and you know, I was even at one point a board certified large animal internist practicing general practice, ambulatory practice, and people would still constantly question me. Like, ex-vet who has no qualifications is, you know, is somehow has, you know, a more meaningful opinion than myself. And at some point, you know, I had to practice, let it go. Like for me, you know, I knew what I was doing was good, that I have always striven to be excellent at what I do. I'm not stopping at being board certified. I'm reading all the time, keeping up to date, you know, just being the best vet I can be. And I think at a certain point, if that's not good enough for them, that's on them. That's their prejudice that's clouding their judgment. And you can't take that on. So I think for me, it's just be the best that you can be, and then acknowledge that there are other factors out there that are not your problem.
And I would add, so I worked in a slightly different setting in public health, but I did have this struggle with kind of people refusing to use the appropriate honorific with me, and they would use it with my boss. So it would be a Dr. Blank and Heather, and I was like, that doesn't even make sense grammatically, like you know. And so at first I would tell myself, well, maybe because I look young, and you mentioned that, Dr. Mundy, and it made me uncomfortable. I felt like I was being uppity if I'm like, excuse me, call me doctor. But if that's what I want to be called, and you're going to give that title to someone else, you know, I learned to speak up for myself, even if it was uncomfortable. And especially as a woman of color, as a Black woman, you know, I would be, you know, the first Black veterinarian that some people even met. You know, the first Black veterinarian I ever met was at Penn, and I think we were talking about the same one, Dr. Mundy, that you worked with at Penn. So when you said that, I was like, I know her. But seriously, so when I go into in front of different audiences, and they were like, oh, Heather, I lived in Seattle, and they were the culture of Seattle was very laid back. Oh, we don't use titles here. Or they would just kind of use them randomly, and it was usually older white men that they would use the titles with, and then no one else. And you're like, okay, I noticed that. But I had to learn how to say, you know, no, you know, I'm here presenting to these students. I might be the first, whatever that they've ever had, whether it's a Black female, Black person, Black veterinarian that presents to them. I want them to hear that title and see it addressed to me so they can see it in themselves. So I, at times, had to make sure the people around me understood that and recognized that and get comfortable having that conversation. This is why, not just because I'm uppity or whatever. I want you to use the title because it has meaning. So in that clinical setting, make sure that your staff are calling you by that name if that helps reinforce that piece as well, or that they're there to support you as well. And if that means the practice owner, the practice manager understands that, and that can assist you as well. I would say, it's definitely a team effort, unfortunately, at times.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you each and every one of you. This has been a phenomenal experience for me. I've learned a lot. I feel like we've bonded as sisters as part of this. I'm just going to call out a couple of kind of resounding things that came up throughout the conversation. So we talked a lot about mentorship. We talked about the importance of networking. Persistence was one that came up. Being fearless. With education becomes responsibility. And then I'd have to give Dr. Mundy this one, which is probably my all-time favorite, just let it go. So I do want to thank our panelists. I'm going to hand it over to Steffi to close out the call.
Yes, a big, big thank you. I can't, the amount of times that my heartstrings were pulled today, so many of the comments, I have to say, there have been requests to quote a number of you because what you said has been so impactful on people. So I just wanted to let you know that a big, big thank you to all of you for sharing, for being so open, and for allowing us to just get a glimpse of what your experiences have been, and just all of the lessons that you've learned along the way, and that you were able to share that with all of us and all of our listeners today. I do want to remind people that we are having a post-event survey, and we put it again in the chat. Just go ahead and click it, have it open in your browser, and then go ahead and fill it when this is all over. Just wanted to make sure you have that in. But essentially, this is wrapping up our event. It's 9 o'clock on the dot right now, and I just wanted to give, again, a very, very big thank you to our panelists here, Dr. Woc-Colburn, Dr. Tan, Dr. Mundy, and Dr. Fowler, as well as our amazing, amazing panelist, Dr. Tangela Williams-Hill. Yes, she does deserve a round of applause. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for coming, and I hope you all have a good night, good evening, good morning, wherever you're calling in from.
Good night, everyone.